In the ancient world, there were two goddesses, and they come from different traditions, and they had many different names in different traditions. Okay? But essentially, these goddesses were the two teachers of humanity. Regardless of what their names were, what anybody wanted to call them in each individual culture throughout time, throughout history, they were teachers. They were considered teachers by the people who understood what these concepts meant. These aren't real people. This is the other thing people have to understand. When I talk about the goddess, when I talk about the goddess of this culture or the goddess of that culture, I'm not talking about a real being. It's not a real supernatural entity or a real person or being in the flesh. This is a symbolic concept. It's an allegorical concept to get people to understand something about moral teachings. So in the Egyptian tradition, and again, she had hundreds of different names in many other traditions. In the Egyptian tradition, the first goddess that I'm talking about was called Isis. And Isis was the mother of Horus. And here you see them depicted on the left in slide number 97. Isis was the mother goddess. She was the goddess of truth, wisdom, love. She was the bearer of the light into the world. She was the bringer of the light, the sun, the solar deity Horus. So here she's depicted holding Horus, and he's ready to breastfeed from her. She's offering Horus sustenance. She represented the night sky that gives birth to the solar deity at dawn. So she's the bringer of the light at dawn. And this represents that the sacred feminine, in other words, the emotional qualities within the being, the internal aspect, the heart and care that exists within the individual, or the spirit of the individual, is what would give birth to the sacred masculine child of right action. Right action in the world is what Horus represented. And this is why the goddess was depicted in this image as having a green hue. You see, she's green because she's the heart. She's the color of the heart, of love energy, the heart chakra, nature, the energy of nature, natural law, the understanding of natural law, balance. She's the color of balance and love, which is green, the center, the balance point of the visible spectrum. She would give birth to the golden child. Horus was always depicted as gold. He was often depicted as a golden hawk. The sun is the golden hawk that makes the journey across the sky each day. So he was depicted as a gold child. There you see he's gold sitting on the lap of the green mother. Because he is the sun. He is the enlightenment that is born out of care. He is right action that is born out of the care and spirit and heart of a person. It's a beautiful allegory if it's decoded properly, if it's understood correctly. Most people don't understand it. They want to literalize it. They want to say these are actual people. No, they weren't actual people. They're conceptual ideas. They're allegories to teach a moral lesson about what's going on inside the individual, or what should be going on inside the individual. So, Isis represented the teacher of truth. The easy way to do it. Open up your mind, open up your heart, learn the truth, take in the knowledge, accept that which cannot be changed, natural law, understand that, and then change what should be changed, the injustices that are going on in the world. This is the easy path. You could call this the right-hand path, or you can even call it the middle path, really, is what it is. It's the easy way of doing things. It's the most direct route. I would say, yes, it is the middle path, really. Okay, so Isis would open her arms to all that would want to come into the truth. She is the goddess of the truth. Its truth is always there, waiting with open arms. It's us who refuses it. Eris, on the other hand, was the goddess of chaos. So in the Greek tradition, she was called Eris, and she was the chaotic teacher. When Isis's lessons, or you could just say the goddess of love and truth. You could look at that in the Greek tradition as Aphrodite or Athena or many other names. Okay, the goddess that would teach truth, that would bring truth to people and open up their mind and heart. When her teaching was refused, then natural law would come in the eros form, in the chaotic form. So you might know this in the Indian or Indus Valley tradition as Kali. Kali is the mother that is the chaotic aspect of the goddess. You know, you could look at this in the Egyptian tradition as Ma'at. Ma'at would come, and it was the forces of nature and natural law, wreaking havoc if necessary if the people became immoral. And this is what Eros is. Eros is the teacher in the negative aspect. It's the same thing. It's natural law. We're talking about natural law, and whether it is accepted and understood and lived by, or whether it is rejected, not understood, and people live in opposition to it. This is how they depicted this boundary condition of the universe called natural law, as Isis or Eros, and again by many other names. So when natural law was not understood and it was refused, truth was refused, the lessons of truth were refused, and people were living out of harmony with morality and natural law, then Eros would arrive to teach painfully through chaos. She was the bringer of chaos. She was the bringer of suffering. Suffering would have to be the teacher. People would have to suffer, and they would have to lose things, and they would have to be harmed, and violence would have to be done to them until they understood that that was not how to truly learn and grow and progress in consciousness. That you have to open up your mind, open up your heart, and learn and take in knowledge and take in truth. That really the only true, real teacher was Isis. And Eros would just be the disciplinarian who would whip your ass and then send you back to the real teacher. You could look at Eros like that. And that doesn't mean she's a bad thing. Again, it's the boundary conditions of natural law going into effect when people start to live in an immoral way in the world. So chaos is not a bad thing. Moving to slide number 98 now. Chaos is a teacher. Eros was not a bad thing. She is a teacher. She teaches you what not to do. She's the apophatic teacher, you could say. She teaches you through the negative. That if you're going to put your hand on the hot stove, on the hot range top, it's going to be burnt. This isn't a tragedy. It's learning what not to do. It's saying this is a law. This is how this law operates. You're not going to be insulated from trying to break this law. If you try to break this law, you are going to be held accountable, and there are going to be consequences for breaking natural law. What humanity unfortunately appears to be is retarded. We are retarded. We're a retarded people. We're slow to get this lesson. That's what retarded means, having been slowed down. And I'm going to get into future episodes how we were slowed down. There's a reason that we were slowed down. We are literally retarded. We have been deliberately slowed down so that we don't get this understanding that if you put your hand on the stove, it gets burned. We're the retarded child that keeps putting their hand on the stove over and over again until the flesh melts off the bone. And then we're putting a skeletal hand on top of the burner until the bones turn to ash. That's how far we want to take it. Only someone who has been slowed down, made into a being that has been retarded or slowed down, would do this. No truly intelligent species would act like this. Because this is a metaphor. This slide, exactly what you see here, is a metaphor for what humanity is. We are the child who does this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again and never gets the lesson. And there's a reason that we can't seem to get the lesson. And ultimately, it's such a horror story that we really need to learn it, and we need to address it, and we need to take it seriously, and we need to understand, well, since this is the condition, now what are we going to do about it? One of the things that could help is really bringing the truth to as many people continuously, over and over, because while genes have to do with an expression in the physical domain, there are epigenetic conditions, meaning the condition around the expression of the genetic aspect of the being that will affect the genetics of the being. Epigenetics means that the experience that the being is having and that the culture that the being is living in is having as much of an effect on the expression of genes as any other aspect, as heredity. It's just as important as the physical interactions of the genetics of the being itself, and arguably even much more important. The concept of nurture is much more important than what's there physically. The culture, the surroundings, the conditions that are around the being, that's epigenetics. And that affects the expression even more than just what's there physically in the genetic condition. So I'm going to be talking about stuff like this in the future regarding how did we get to this condition. But that's for another presentation. And believe me, it will be many episodes that we go into that, not just one. So, continuing to correct this ridiculous notion that chaos is something to be feared, this is what holds the whole slavery system in place. It's held in place by the fear of chaos. Okay, so this pyramidal scheme that is our world, with all of the slaves holding up the structure, then the aristocracy, supporting the structure because, we got a little bit more than the rest of the slave class. They're the house slaves, and also the house slaves are the police and military who are keeping all of the slaves underneath them, in physical coercion. And then you have the priest class above them giving people religion, and I would say that's the exoteric priest class. Then you have the kings, royalties, bankers, politicians, etc. above them, and ultimately you have the occult force that's ruling the whole thing. The real priest class, the esoteric, dark priest class. And I think that's a great infographic there that explains the story of what humanity ultimately is, a slave species. The control and slavery system is about the limitation of free will through the destruction of possibility. That's what the control and slavery system wants to do. Limit the possibility of what can occur, not only in the external world, but what can occur in people's minds. They have to limit your imagination, what you can think about, what you can conceive. On slide number 100, I talk about possibility and how it's related to freedom. True freedom includes infinite possibility, which by definition includes the possibility of chaos. Infinite possibility means you have to be open to the possibility of chaos occurring. This possibility must be embraced without fear if we are to be truly free. You cannot be free and be in fear of the possibility of chaos. You have to get rid of that fear. That fear must be held in check. You can't be saying, I'm so afraid that this might happen. You're not free if you're afraid that something bad might happen. Something bad might happen at any given time. A comet could be on the way to the Earth right now as we speak. You wouldn't know it. You're going to live your life in fear of that? Well, chaos might happen. You're going to live your life in fear of that and say, I want to give up all my rights because chaos might happen? You're not free. You're right in the mindset they want you in.